advocacy under either piece of evidence that they read actually recommending their plan. No one recommends a ban. Instead, you will find the exact words that the precautionary principle has been abandoned, which is why my partner and I recommend that you institute the precautionary principle and provide for safe GMO food policy.
Good evening. My first question for you is the European Union communist?
They have some socialist tendencies, but they're not communist.
All right. Now, under topicality, did you reject the affirmative team's definition of environmental policy?
No, we did not reject the definition. We outweighed it with two other standards, education and...
So, do you believe we shouldn't define environmental policy in this round?
I'm saying that there are greater things that come before the definition that you find from a book that's not meant to define.
Standard of education talked about how we need to fit within environmental policy, right? To be educated?
That, yes, we need to be researching.
We need to define environmental policy first. Would you agree?
No, I don't think the definition is necessary. We should be researching. What I'm saying under this standard is we, as students, are researching environmental policy so that we can debate about that and become experts on it. And when you present a case outside of that, it doesn't really fit in no matter what definition
How do
you
we
find.
determine what is outside of environmental policy?
Usually you find a definition from a dictionary.
So we need to look at a definition, correct?
You don't have to. There's some common sense principles like, was the word environment at all involved?
All right. Let's move on to your criteria and values. You would agree with me that people have a right to protect their health, correct?
Absolutely.
They have a right to choose what food they're going to eat.
Yes, and your plan
All right.
completely destroys that.
Right. We'll get into that later. My second question talking about the criteria. If your health is improved, your quality of life is improved, correct?
Generally speaking. There are other factors that go into your quality of life, and some people may value, jumping out of an airplane with a parachute.
Health is a facet of most people's quality of life, correct?
Generally speaking, yes.
Now, talking about the counterplan, my first question is, do you provide any advocacy for your counterplan?
Yes. First of all, I didn't get to mine, but there were 3 pieces of evidence in your case that called for more strict standards, application of the precautionary principle, and another one that called for tougher regulation before we allow GMOs back on the market. That would be your opening.
Now, under your counterplan, you talked about we need a precautionary principle, we need to prove it safe first, right?
Right.
So you do agree that the safety of GM foods has not been proven, right?
It has not been required to be proven.
All right. Now, under cross-pollination, you are agreeing that cross-pollination does occur and it does infest other crops, correct?
In limited cases, yes.
Okay, how limited?
I didn't have the evidence. I was pointing out that your evidence doesn't support that it is unavoidable.
But it is. The cross-pollination is there with certain crops.
You're going to have to quantify that with your evidence before we can debate.
Now, under your counterplan, you talked about us having a guilty until proven innocent, right?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to study the issue and then maybe approve them if they are safe, right?
Right, just like pharmaceuticals.
Okay, what are the standards for this?
The standards are first that there's a pre-market survey and testing just like with pharmaceuticals, and then there's a post-market surveillance system before it is released to the broader public.
All right, my last question is talking about the cross-pollination. You talk about how there's already a mechanism to prevent this. What is this mechanism?
They have multiple types of devices that people, including buffers and including the types of spray that's used.
All right, we'll be looking for some advocacy on that also.
Can you let us know about that? needed. Is everybody ready? Negative. All right, several years ago, the European Union proposed a ban on genetically modified organisms. The ban was passed and upheld until about a couple of years ago when it was removed. Now the negative team came up and talked to you about this is what communists do, this is what communists do, even pretended to do something with his ear. But the point here is that basically when you look at it, it's not just something communists do. This has been done throughout the world by non-communist organizations, specifically the European Union. Now in cross-examination we asked, are they communists? And he said, well, they've got communist tendencies. Well, our response to this is pretty much every nation, including the United States, has communist tendencies. So to just dismiss what every nation throughout the world does because they have communist tendencies would be saying, well, we're just going to do what we think is right, not based on whatever anyone else does. So in this picture, we're going to be going down topicality, the value criterion, and then the counterplan. The counterplan really is the same as the justification arguments. I'll respond to them both there. But let's begin with topicality. Now basically, in cross-examination, he basically admitted that we do need a definition. In fact, if you look at the standard of framers' intent, the framers put two words in there called environmental policy. So in order to actually see what their intent is, we need to know what those words actually mean, which is why we need a definition. And this is something, a gross outrage of the affirmative team, is that the negative team says, well, we need a definition, but we're not going to give you one. We need one from a dictionary, but we're not going to give you one. Number one, they never gave you any reason to prefer one from a dictionary. Number two, they never presented you with one. So we're left with the one brought up in the 1AC, which I'm going to reread for you, from John McCormack, a professor of political science. He's got a lot of credentials. His book was Environmental Policy in the European Union. He is talking about environmental policy. He is defining environmental policy. And he said, environmental policy is any course of action deliberately taken or not taken to manage human activities with a view to prevent, reduce, or mitigate harmful effects to nature and natural resources, and ensuring that man-made changes to the environment do not have harmful effects on humans, end quote. So really, they do accept this definition, but because the negative team never brought up a counter definition. That's our first point here, is resolutional interpretation. First response is resolutional interpretation. It's going to be based on the definition. And number one, you have to reduce the negative effects on the environment, which we see in justification 2. And the second thing that we need to do is look at the harmful effects of humans, justification 1. So both points here, we actually do meet this definition. And now really, let's look at their other two standards. Their first standard, actually, I don't have it really written down, but they're basically the same. The framer's intent, and basically we need to look overall what basically food policy versus environmental policy. Our response here is, well, number one, we have to have the definition for framer's intent. And number two is there's absolutely no reason for the food policy versus environmental standard. He gave no reasons at all that there can't be overlap. In fact, there actually is overlap. Almost everything that is done in the government, it does overlap with food policy at times. Yes, we're not disputing that. But what we're disputing is that automatically means that it's not environmental policy. They say food policy must automatically mean it's not environmental policy. There were no reasons given by the negative team to that point. Now really, there are only two impacts. Their first impact was, well, this is important, and we agree it's important. But the second impact was really, well, that means our counterplan is not topical. We give them that the counterplan is not topical. So really what we're left with is this is a big decision for the judge to make. And this really isn't a voting issue at all. It's a big decision. That's the only impact that you're left with. We provide, instead, let's just look at, we're going to have a reasonable debate. That's the only thing that we should look at when it comes to the impact. Are we going to have a reasonable debate? Looking based on the 5 points that he brought up in his speech, we're going to have